safety and the effect of fertilizers on human health. It's a narrative review. So my topic covers objectives, introduction, methodology, policy recommendations, conclusion, and references. First of all, my research topic has three objectives. First objective, the narrative review aim to study how food safety and the use of fertilizers and critical issues that significantly impact human health. And second one is the safety of our food supply is a growing concern for many people, particularly in light of recent foodborne illness breakdown. And third one is using fertilizers, while necessary for crop production, can also negatively affect human health if not properly managed. So let's start from introduction. Food security is a global issue that has gained increasing attention over the years. It is a condition in which all people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet their dietary needs and food preserved for an active and healthy life. Food infected with harmful bacteria, viruses, parasites, or chemical substances that causes more than 200 disorders, which ranging from diarrhea to cancer. Fertilizers are an essential component of modern agriculture, helping to increase crop yield, maintain soil fertility. However, their use can also have negative impact on human health. Fertilizers are designed to provide essential nutrients to plants, such as nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. They are typically made up of chemical components that are synthetically produced, such as ammonium, nitrate, urea, and superphosphate. While they are effective at boosting crop yield, fertilizer can also have negative effect on human health. One of the most significant risks associated with the use of fertilizers is the contamination of groundwater and surface water. Nitrate, a common component of fertilizer, can easily dissolve in water and contaminate water sources. When consumed in high concentration, nitrate can be harmful to human health, particularly for infant and pregnant women. It can cause a condition called methemoglobinemia, also known as blue baby syndrome, which can reduce the oxygen carrying capacity of blood and cause serious health problems. Another risk associated with the use of fertilizers is exposure to toxic chemicals. Many fertilizers contain heavy metals such as lead, cadmium, and can accumulate the soil and eventually end up in the food chain. Exposure to these toxics can lead to a range of health problems, including cancer, neurological disorders, and reproductive problems. To minimize the negative impact of fertilizer on human health, it is important to adopt sustainable agriculture practices. This can include the use of organic fertilizers, such as compost and manure, which are less likely to contaminate water source and cause health problems. Food safety and the use of fertilizers are critical issues that have a significant impact on human health, as we have already discussed lately. The safety of our food supply is a growing concern for many people, particularly in light of foodborne illness breakdown. Using fertilizers, while necessary for crop production, can also negatively affect human health. In this narrative, we have examined the critical themes related to food safety and the effect of fertilizers on human health. These are the critical themes. First one is foodborne illness. Second one is pesticides, antibiotics, fertilizers, and organic food. Let's discuss these one by one. First, we have foodborne illness. Most of the significant threat to food is a foodborne illness. Every year, many people become ill from consuming contaminated food. Pathogens such as Salmonella, E. coli can be present in food and can cause illness. Food handling and processing procedure follows. Preventing foodborne illness requires specific approaches that involve regulations and enforcement. Second one is pesticides. The use of pesticides on crops can have a significant impact on food safety. Pesticides can enter the food chain through residue on fruit, vegetables, and excessive exposure to some pesticides has been linked to cancer and other health problems. It's essential to carefully manage the use of pesticides to minimize the risk of human health. Antibiotics are often used in animal agriculture to prevent and treat disease. The overuse of antibiotics can lead to the development of antibiotic resistant bacteria, which can seriously affect human health. Antibiotic resistance infections can be challenging to treat. The use of fertilizers can increase crop yield, but excessive use of fertilizers can lead to environmental contamination, can have adverse effect on human health. Nitrate contamination of water source cause methemoglobinemia, which we have discussed before, also known as blue baby syndrome, which can be fatal in infants. Now is organic food. Organic food is often perceived as safer to conventionally grown food, but it is produced without synthetic pesticides and fertilizers. However, organic food can still be contaminated by pathogens, and there debate over whether organic food is healthy than conventionally grown food. So there are some policies recommendations. As per my literature review, we have recommended some policies. Number one is food security is essential for the health and well-being of individuals and communities. According to UN Food and Agriculture Organization, over 820 million people worldwide suffer from chronic hunger, malnutrition, and this number is on the rise. Food insecurity is caused by a complex set of factors, including poverty, climate change, natural disasters, and limited access to education and healthcare. It affects the most vulnerable populations, including children, women, elderly, and people living in rural areas. To address food security, a multidimensional approach is required. This involves improving agriculture productivity, increase access to markets, enhancing protection, promoting nutrition education, empowering women and smallholders, investment in sustainable agriculture, rural development. These are critical for reducing poverty and hunger. Sustainable agriculture practices can help conserve natural resources and protect the environment and increase the yield. Additionally, investing in the infrastructure such as roads, irrigation system, and storage facilities can improve market access and reduce food waste. Furthermore, social protection programs such as food assistance, cash transfer, feeding programs can provide a safety net for vulnerable population and help to break the cycle of poverty and hunger. Promoting nutrition education and empowering women are also crucial for improving food security. Nutrition education can help to promote healthy eating habits and reduce malnutrition while empowering women. Can increase their access to resources and improve their ability to provide for their families. Here are some other policy recommendations like food security. The importance of fertilizers is widely recognized, and research has also been shown that nutrition management may boost the health promoting component of plant based food and feed. This is significant because plant health, mineral, macro and micronutrient applications in animals and human nutrition have direct and indirect links. In conclusion, food safety and using fertilizers are complex issues that require careful management to ensure that human health is protected. Preventing foodborne illness, managing the use of pesticides, antibiotics, promoting sustainable farming practices are all critical components of a comprehensive approach to ensuring the safety of our food supply. By taking a multifaceted approach to these issues can also help to ensure that our food is safe and healthy for everyone. These are the references.
The project manager. I'm honored to participate in this webinar as a young researcher and biologist. So I will briefly present about the possibility of biological control of scab disease by using antagonist isolate from soil in North Macedonia. First of all, I would like to say a few words about the pathogenic fungus Venturi inequalis, which is haploid and heterothallic microorganism originated from Central Asia. It causes scab disease in Malus domestica, which negatively affects their commercial quality. Its control based of using agrochemicals, they are frequently using in this industry, usually lead to increase the resistance to pathogen of pathogen to the fungicides, increased risks of residues, neurotoxicity, and also it would have negative effect on male fertility. On the other hand, using of microbial antagonists in the scab disease controlling is above all, it's preventive, safer, and cheaper. In this slide are shown the results taken from Macedonian Statistical Office about the number of fruit trees, production, and agricultural areas in North Macedonia. Fruit bearing has a very long historical tradition in many areas in North Macedonia, but the biggest region is Prespa, which is widely known as the biggest apple producer region. In this research was investigated antifungal activity of microorganisms Bacillus velezensis and Penibacillus polymixa. They are soil microorganisms, gram-positive bacteria, they're also sporogenous, and they produce secondary metabolites, different enzymes, antifungal substances which can reduce the growth of this pathogenic fungus Venturium inequalis. The aim of study was isolation of pure culture of Venturi inequalis from diseased trees, then isolation of bacteria from compost, determine the antifungal activity of Bacillus and Penibacillus species under in vitro conditions against the fungus Venturi inequalis, dilution test to find the initial concentration and determine their minimal inhibitory concentration. For this purpose, first of all, we isolated diseased organs from Malus domestica. More precisely, we worked with a local variant Red Delicious, where we isolated diseased organs from 3 different locations in Prespa. We use the following media to isolate a pure culture of Venturi inequalis from diseased fruits. They were potato dextrose-agar, saburo dextrose-agar, apple dextrose-agar, and nutrition agar plus 2% glucose. Venturia was seeded using by the puncture method, and the plates were incubated for 5 to 7 days at the room temperature. We also isolated pure cultures of microorganisms from compost by using the serial dilution method. Where each dilution was inoculated on nutrition agar, and they were incubated for 22 hours at 37 degrees Celsius. DNAs of these microorganisms were isolated. Then we performed colony PCR and sequencing. To evaluate the antifungal properties of the isolates, 100 milliliters of Venturi inequalis was spread on a plate which was a mixture of Miller-Hinton agar and saburo-dextrose agar. Then 10 microliters of each isolate were pipetted into open wells. Also, we performed dilution tests to find the initial concentration. And lastly, we elaborated minimal inhibitory concentration. We use again a mixture of Miller-Hinton broth and saburo-dextrose bore, bacterial inoculum with known concentration, and Venturi inequalis. The microplate was incubated for 5 to 7 days at 30 degrees Celsius. So let's take a glance to the results from isolation of a pure culture from the Venturi inequalis. As we can see, Venturi inequalis gave the largest colonies on apple dextrose agar, but the colonies on potato dextrose agar were denser and cleaner. So potato dextrose agar was chosen as the most suitable medium to cultivate Venturi inequalis under in vitro conditions. In this slide are shown the pure culture of each isolate, which were inoculated by a streaking method on Miller-Hinton agar. These microorganisms had been isolated, amplified, sequenced, and marked as Bacillus velezensis AA/1, AA/21, 22, Penibacillus polymixa AA/9, 11, 15, and Bacillus velezensis AA/19, 2, and Bacillus species AA/20. The results from diffusion tests actually were promising, where we obtained inhibitory zones from almost all isolates, but only Penibacillus polymixa AA/11 and 50 had clean inhibitory zones. On the other hand, Bacillus velezensis AA/19 and 20 gave bigger inhibitory zones than isolates from Penibacillus polymixa, but they were fungistatics. There is the results from dilution test to find the initial concentration, where we provided Bacillus velezensis AA/1 had the lowest antifungal properties. On the other hand, AA/21 and 22 had antifungal properties only at a higher concentration. Penibacillus polymixa AA/9, 11, and 15 had clean inhibitory zone, but AA/15 had the most superior antifungal properties belong them because it had antifungal activity even after 5-time dilution, and the later ones were fungistatics in nature. To confirm the results, to confirm the obtained results from previous tests, we also performed minimal inhibitory concentration test, and we totally got the same results. And if we summarize all of this research, we can say the pathogenic fungus Venturi inequalis shows the best growth in potato dextrose agar. Isolate Penibacillus polymixa AA/15 has the superior antifungal properties, which minimal inhibitory concentration is 10 to -5 milliliter suspension. So the results suggest that the tested bacterial isolates that show significant antifungal activity against pathogenic fungus Venturi inequalis can be adequate alternative for the existing chemical fungicide. Future challenge of this project will be testing these microorganisms under in vivo in situ conditions, then comparing the results from in vitro test and in vivo in situ test, then comparison their effect with chemical fungicides, and maybe their different combination or formulations may allow the complete removal of conventional fungicides in the future. On this occasion, I would thank to Macedonian Ecological Society, because it wouldn't have been possible to complete this research without their financial support. There is the reference, and thanks for your attention.
It was a narrative review. Actually, all of us, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Is responsible for the anti-inflammatory effect, and any anti-inflammation can any inflammation in the brain can lead to cognitive impairment, thereby leading to dementia. All of us know that. So to start with, I want to first tell you about the role of vitamin D on brain health. So all of us, we know about the anti-inflammatory effect and the antioxidant effect. But there has been studies on animals which has shown that it also causes the formation of the new neurons by promoting the neurotrophic factors like the nerve growth factor and the glial brain-derived factor. So in one word, it is neuroprotective with its effect of promoting NGF and GDNF. And we all know that it is also causing problems with the neurotransmitters, because vitamin D deficiency has also been implicated in neuropsychiatric disorders like schizophrenia and all. So the other effect of the vitamin D is it actually increases the gene expression of the neurotransmitters, especially those neurotransmitters which are involved in cognition, like the dopamine and the acetylcholine. So that is one important effect of vitamin D. And the other thing is, it was also shown that vitamin D is going to reduce the formation of amyloid, and it also reduces the tau hyperphosphorylation. Not only this, but it also helps in clearance of the amyloid. So all these things we see in Alzheimer's disease, the tau hyperphosphorylation and the amyloid deposition. So all these, even the production is reduced, as well as the clearance is increased. So this is a very good effect of vitamin D, which can help us in the treatment of Alzheimer's, but still we don't have studies promoting the role of vitamin D. So, but the other thing that we found in the studies was that when we tried to correlate the levels of the vitamin D with the markers, biomarkers of Alzheimer's. The biomarkers of Alzheimer's are A-beta-42 and the total tau. So there was no correlation found between the vitamin D levels and the biomarkers, so the CSF biomarkers of Alzheimer's, like the A-beta-42 and the total tau. So that is why it is still not confirmed whether vitamin D can help in treating Alzheimer's or any kind of dementia. Not only this, but vitamin D is also found to reduce the glutamate-induced neurotoxicity, because the glutamate can cause the damage of the neurons. It has also shown to do that. And apart from that, it has also shown to increase the expression of the genes which are reducing the synaptic proteins. So this way, it is having a very big role in the brain health. So if we have deficiency of vitamin D, then what's going to happen? All the neurodegenerative disorders like the Alzheimer's and others, it is implicated in causing Alzheimer's and schizophrenia, depression, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, autism, and all these disorders. We have subtle neurobiological, or you can say neuroimaging changes at a molecular level. And we think that probably it is not, we still can't say that it's a causative factor, but we can say that vitamin D is a risk factor for these illnesses. Now, how? Why? Because in the brain, we have the vitamin D receptors, and these vitamin D receptors, they are very densely located at the areas of the brain which are responsible for memory, executive functioning, and the cognitive functioning, basically. As you know, cognition involves the memory, the learning, executive functioning, everything. So especially the VDR receptors, the vitamin D receptors, are especially thickly located in these brain areas which are responsible for the memory, like the hippocampus, amygdala, the prefrontal cortices, thalamus, and so on. So not only that, just like in kidney, we say that we have the enzyme which converts the inactive vitamin D25 hydroxy vitamin D to 125 hydroxy. The same enzyme was also found in the brain, which converts the inactive 25 hydroxy or vitamin D to 125 hydroxy vitamin D. So this is how we know that vitamin D is helping in brain function. Now, for all this, we need an evidence to say that whether it is actually associated, any deficiency is actually associated with cognitive impairment or dementia. So when I reviewed the articles, I found many cross-sectional studies which has shown a positive association of low vitamin D with all-cause dementia or cognitive impairment. But the problem was the same finding was not replicated in the cross-sectional studies. So that's why we can say that it is a causative factor. We can say that it is a risk factor. Apart from that, many meta-analyses and systematic reviews have also found an association between low vitamin D and memory impairment or cognitive impairment. But the problem with these systematic reviews were they included the cross-sectional studies. And you know, the cross-sectional studies cannot give you an idea about the causality. If you want to say that this is a cause, you need a prospective study and a randomized control trial, but both the randomized control trials and the prospective studies were incomplete. So here I want to mention two very big studies. One was a study by Sander. It was a Swedish study which was done on more than 200, almost around 3,000 patients. And they have seen the correlation of low vitamin D with cognitive impairment over a period of 18 years. And they said that there is no such association. Another study, which was very big, which was by Oslo, which is an American study again, the patient size was 13,000, and the follow-up was 20 years. And even this study was inconclusive to say that vitamin D could cause cognitive impairment. But we have a rich evidence at the level of the cross-sectional studies saying that, yes, they are definitely associated. But coming to the RCTs, if that is so, for example, if we consider that vitamin D is a cause for cognitive impairment, then any supplementation of vitamin D should actually show improvement, but it was not shown in most of the RCTs.
Excuse me, Sadia.
Yes.
At which slide you are?
There was one study. It is a study done by Bedown, and in this study, they have seen two groups, and in one group, they have supplemented vitamin D before any involvement of symptoms or before any start of symptoms. They supplemented individuals in 50 years of age. They supplemented with vitamin D, one group. And when they have seen them over a period of 10 years, these individuals, this group of people which were given vitamin D, they did not develop any cognitive impairment when compared to those who were not supplemented with vitamin D. But the cognitive domain of the verbal fluency was not affected, but the two groups, they have shown the same decline in terms of visual and verbal memory, but the only difference was those which were supplemented with vitamin D, they had less decline in their verbal fluency. Okay, but they did conclude that it definitely reduces the cognitive decline if supplementation of vitamin D is started in a middle age. So that is one good study which supports the use of prophylactic, I can say that, use of vitamin D. Then coming to the RCTs, RCTs had many problems because most of the RCTs were small sized, and still we don't have a consensus over the dose of vitamin D, because vitamin D is both neurotoxic in higher doses, and it is also causing problems with the brain if it is in lower doses. So we need to know the exact dose which is required for such individuals. And we don't have a decisive age of giving or starting vitamin B supplement. When to start? We don't know when to start, because people who are likely to develop Alzheimer's, they are going to start the changes 10 years before they develop the symptoms. You know, the brain changes, they start 10 years before any symptom of Alzheimer's starts. So that's why we don't know when to start the vitamin D. Still, we are not conclusive about that. Can you see the next slide? So there was no conclusive evidence as in terms of causality. But then if you want to know the causality, if you want to correlate the causality and vitamin D deficiency as a cause for Alzheimer's, then we need to correlate the neuroimaging changes. So therefore, this review was done to see whether the vitamin D is showing some specific neuroimaging changes. Can you see the change in slide? Sarah?
Yes, it is showing. Yes, it is showing,
yeah.
Shadia.
Okay. So then coming to the results, now we are actually going into the neuroimaging changes. Now we want to know, because we know that if there is a symptom associated with that, there will be a specific problem in the brain. For example, if the person has aphasia, there will be a problem in the Broca's area of the brain. Like that, if the person has memory impairment, then there should be a problem in the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the prefrontal cortices, especially the frontal subcortical regions. So this is there in our mind. And now we want to see whether there is any change in the brain when there is any deficiency of vitamin D in individuals. So the first evidence, when we try to search for the evidence, we first search the animal studies, right? So in the animal studies, they have actually taken mother mice who is likely to give birth to a mice, and they gave deficient diet, vitamin D diet, to the mother mice, so that they see that whether there is any neurodevelopmental changes in the brain, and they did find that. Okay, and another study was they actually have seeing two groups of mice. One group was given deficient vitamin D diet, and the other group was given proper vitamin D. And the group of mice with lower vitamin D has shown enlarged lateral ventricle, which suggests that there is a problem in the frontal lobe, which suggests frontal lobe atrophy, and reduced cortical thickness, especially involving the frontal lobes. And they have also shown changes in the amygdala and the hippocampus. The volumes of the amygdala and the hippocampus was less in the mice which was given vitamin D deficient diet. This was also replicated in the knockout mice, where the VDR receptor is knocked out or removed. Then there is a lot of vitamin D deficiency in this mice. And this mice have again shown all these neuroimaging changes. But then when they supplemented with higher doses of vitamin D, they found that higher doses are also neurotoxic. So this is vitamin D is a double-edged sword if you want to treat, because higher doses can be neurotoxic and lower doses can also be neurotoxic. So this is a double-edged sword. So then coming to the evidence from the MRIs of the humans, like evidence of the white matter changes. So when the MRI and the diffusion tensor imaging was done on people who had mild cognitive impairment associated with vitamin D deficiency, they found that the total brain volume was low, and there were a lot of white matter hyperintensities in the MRI. So white matter hyperintensities in the MRI suggest that there is a problem at the level of the circuit, and especially the cortico-subcortical white matter tracts were affected in these individuals. So this particular circuit, the cortico-subcortical circuit, is actually responsible for cognition, for memory, for the executive functioning. So they very clearly found that there was a disruption in the cortico-subcortical white matters. Okay. So, but again, this was again at a cross-sectional level. But when they saw the same study at a prospective level after 10, 20 years, when they tried to see the changes in the MRI, these changes that did not progress. So then we again cannot conclude that this is a conclusive thing, because the same finding was not replicated in the prospective study, and this was shown with Ernst Wheeler's study very clearly. Then coming to the gray matter changes, the most prominent finding was, of course, the enlarged ventricle, where the frontal cortices, which frontal cortical atrophy, especially the prefrontal cortex, was atrophic. And in the prefrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate cortex was more thinner, and the hippocampus, which is mainly responsible for the memory, the volumes of the hippocampus were found to be low. And the only finding, the neuroimaging finding, which was replicated in the prospective study, was the low hippocampal volumes. So that shows that the hippocampus, which is responsible for the memory, was atrophic in people who had vitamin D deficiency. Not only this, the hippocampal thalamo-prefrontal connections, even they were shown disrupted in diffusion tensor imaging in the MRI. So these two findings were replicated in the prospective studies. And this goes on to show that there is definitely a change, and there is definitely an association of vitamin D deficiency with cognitive impairment and the associated neuroimaging changes. Okay. Now, coming to this, but again, I want to about a few of the confounders which can be assessed here. Most of the studies, we have a lot of confounders in terms of a low sample size, because you're taking people for MRI and you won't get many individuals enrolling in your less 25. There are many confounders like chronic kidney disease, which can also cause neuroimaging changes. They were also included. People who have depression at a chronic level, they also have smaller hippocampal volumes. So these patients were also included. So there were many in this study, and I can say this, that there is no systematic review or meta-analysis yet done on this topic, because the studies that you found, they are not very similar. For a meta-analysis or systematic review, you need very similar studies. So in terms of considering patients, some of the studies, they took patients who don't have any cognitive impairment. Some of the studies, they took patients who have already started mild cognitive impairment. Some of the studies took vitamin D deficiency as less than 30 nanomolecules, whereas some of the study defined vitamin D deficiency as less than 20 nanomolecules. And the measurement of the cognition was different with the different scales. So there were many issues in these studies. That's why still, I think we have not come up with a systematic review or meta-analysis. In fact, there is one meta-analysis which is still at a protocol level. I have done the review for that. It is BMG, British Journal of Psychiatry. In that, it is going to get published, but it's still at a protocol level. So this is how I want to say that still we can't say that anything is conclusive in this regard, because still we don't have a meta-analysis reporting that yes, these are the changes because of vitamin D deficiency. Because there is a problem of reverse causality also here. Reverse causality means, is the dementia causing vitamin D deficiency, or vitamin D deficiency is leading to dementia? Because both the ways it can happen. Because people who have dementia, they become more housebound, and there is less sunlight, there is less dietary input of vitamin D. So they may actually subsequently cause vitamin D deficiency. So reverse causality is another problem. So, but with the study, the only thing that we can conclude here is that there is definitely change. And for that, the most important study I would like you to, or I would suggest you, is Framingham Heart Study. This was actually done to see the effect of vitamin D deficiency on cardiovascular system, but it subsequently has shown that it also increases stroke and it also causes all-cause dementia. And this study, when the same patients were taken for MRI, it has also shown a lot of white matter hyperintensities, suggesting that definitely vitamin D causes white matter abnormalities as well as hippocampal volume atrophy. Okay, but no studies till now, till date, has proven that any supplementation of vitamin D can improve cognition. Okay, so these were the problems: smaller sample size, most individuals were included were mild cognitive impairment. Only one study I think have included the normal people without any cognitive impairment. But most of the studies, they included people who already have cognitive impairment. So you don't know whether vitamin D is causing this or some other reason. There is some other reason for these neuroimaging changes. So confounders, as I told you, seasonal variations and chronic kidney disease and depression, all these were seen. So to conclude, the take-home point from this lecture is that definitely animal studies has shown, even the neuroimaging studies on the humans have shown that there is a problem in white matter tracts, especially those fronto-subcortical tracts which are responsible for the executive functioning, learning, and memory. And hippocampal volume loss is seen, and the frontal lobe atrophy is seen. These are the classic things that have been replicated in many studies. But still, we can say that vitamin D deficiency is a causative factor. You can say that it is a risk factor because no prospective study has replicated the same findings. So this is what I want to inform you about. And here I end my presentation. Thank you so much for being with me. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Any questions?
By very active manual workers in Nairobi, Kenya. This was a thesis study which was done in 2020. So next slide, please. Have evolved and vary within and between ethnic communities. And there are mainly some staple foods that are found around the world were adopted during the period of transition in human history, from small hunter-gatherer nomadic bands to larger agricultural settlements. That is about 10,000 to 3,000 years ago. So ethnic communities' preference for specific foods are influenced by culture, taste, availability, occupation, cost, or convenience. So in Kenya, it's a land of great diversity. We have about 44 tribes. And the preferences for specific staple of foods differ, which is a reflection of the cultural identity and diversity of the communities. Next slide. So these are some of the common foods in Kenya, common staple foods in Kenya. You can see maize, some sweet potato, chapati, which was adopted from India. There's cassava. There's green bananas, Irish potatoes, ugali, and rice. Ugali is a maize meal. So generally, these are some of the top foods that are consumed across Kenya. So next slide, please. So the staple foods, just to define, is those foods that constitute the major part of a routine diet. They generally supply all or most of the total energy and nutrient intake of an individual. So in Kenya, maize meal, which is locally referred as ugali, has been widely adopted as the key staple food and most reliable by about 75% of the population, regardless of the socioeconomic status. So there is generally wide acceptance and reliance, which is propelled by the general perception and stereotype that it is more tasty, it is nutritious, and it has higher satiety compared to other common staples. So some of the other attributes that are associated with the staple is the convenience. It is easy to prepare. There's widespread availability. You can get it anywhere within the country, wherever you live, whether it's in the rural or in the urban. It is more affordable. It's easier to handle, even make. It is, in terms of preservation, you can keep it, particularly the flour for making, you can keep it for long. And then there's less skill needed to prepare the food. Next slide. So if you look at the picture that I've shown there, the image shows that the piece of ugali, this is made from maize meal, the flour is milled, and then water is boiled. We add flour, you mix it over dry heat until it becomes hard, and not very hard, semi-solid. So it can either be consumed white or brown, but whether it is made of maize or wheat flour, ugali is the most preferred. So it was originally associated with one tribe, but over time it has spread all over the country, and most ethnic communities have adopted it. You can hear me? Yes.
Yes,
So most the flour for making the unga, or maybe there's a shortage or the price hikes in the market, you'll always find demonstrations across the country. And actually, it has even determined who becomes leaders if you're not able to provide the main staple in the country. So that is how important ugali is in our community. So to justification for this study, it was that we found that, next slide, there was overwhelming reliance on maize meal as a staple, which has posed a problem both socially, economically, and politically. We have seen street demonstrations because of that. And government's effort is always to try and maintain the supply in the market and also affordability. So this study is to provide empirical evidence that can influence policy decisions, and also to just see whether the stereotypes by different individuals and ethnic communities about the energy staple and the nutritive value hold. So in Kenya, there's a common slang that when there is no ugali, there is no food. So ugali is equivalent to there being food. So next slide. So we find that the justification is both socially, it is associated with business, it's also political, and also there's very little literature review on why the staple has been selected as the most important and most relied upon. So next slide. So the aim of this study, next slide, please. The aim of this study was to evaluate the preference ranking of selected carbohydrate energy staples on the productivity of very active manual workers, because we find that very active manual workers will require a lot of energy. So to test the sum of the stereotypes, that it has more energy and it is more preferred among the very active persons. So specific objectives, next slide, please. Specific objectives was to determine the top ranking carbohydrate energy staples that is selected by the very active manual workers in Kenya, particularly in Nairobi, and then to determine the preference ranking, which is the top carbohydrate and how is it ranked according to the other staples. And then also look at some of the factors that influence choice, the postprandial effect, and assess the correlation between the main carbohydrate energy staple with the type of work that people do. So in this study, in this presentation, I'm going to dwell on just the ranking and the evidence of why it was ranked the way it was ranked. So next slide, please. So in methodology, we targeted very active manual workers purposefully, and they were captured in their place of work. But just to ensure that there's no bias, we set up two control groups: the civil servants working in offices, the university students from one of the universities in Kenya, who are considered relatively moderately active compared to the very active manual workers. So we determined the effective sample size using the G-Power version 3.194 with a small effect size and 95% confidence interval. We had 297 respondents in total. So eligibility for the interview was first to determine whether you met the criteria. You are a very high active person, or you are a student or a civil servant who is moderately active. But also we sought informed consent, but there was no discrimination, whether you are a lady or a man. It was a lady or a gentleman, it was or a female or a male, it was accepted. So the next slide. So we used interviews. We used the interviews, questionnaires, which were subjected to the interviewees. So we also use cross-checking questions. So interviews were done at the site where they are working, or maybe in the university where they are studying, or in their workplace. And then we also sought approval from the Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Health, and the universities to be able to interview the students. And also in the venue of the very active manual workers, we sought permission from the management. So we saw that food is selected from various sources, the staple foods. So we have many, but we were mainly interested in the carbohydrate energy staples, because you'll find that energy is in other foods. But now we were more interested in which carbohydrate is providing the main energy. So we selected the foods and categorized them. So we gave them numbers according to from 1 to 6. So in the interview took about 15 minutes. But now the respondents were asked to indicate which is their main carbohydrate, and then once they gave which their main carbohydrate they take, they were now asked to rank which is the first, second, which is the most preferred among the 6 that were provided. So we had a group of carbohydrates that are many, but just we ranked them because we took the top 5, and then we put others to indicate all the other carbohydrates that are consumed. So we also had cross-checking questions, because once you are told that this is the main carbohydrate, we wanted to see how did you, we had to follow up questions to see whether they actually featured in the meals that they had consumed, or in the 7 days recall, or 7 days consumption frequency, and also in the 24-hour recall by the respondents. So just to confirm why they were also selecting those foods, we also went ahead to confirm that from them. So we did this, and the results are now, we collected the information and did the data analysis. We used mainly ANOVA, Excel data analysis tool, Sheffield test for pairwise comparison, and GPower for correlation and regression analysis. So maybe we can move to the next slide, please. We can discuss the results. So in terms of the results, go to the slides with the next slides, the slides with the pie charts. So on comparisons of the results, we saw the results show that among the very active manual workers, most of them selected ugali as their main carbohydrate energy staple. We went ahead to using the same data that we have collected from all of them and compared how all of them had selected, and we found that if we select, we've compared all the groups, 77% also went ahead to select ugali as their main carbohydrate energy staples, which was followed by rice and then chapati. For very active manual workers, it was followed by chapati and then rice. But for all the groups, the rice came in second and then chapati came in third. So the next slide. So in terms of ranking, for the very active manual workers, the ranking, ugali appeared in the ranks from 1 to 3. But for the other foods, it appeared from the ranks from 2 to 4. So we found that it was among the top 3 selections that was made. And among the universities, the rank of ugali was ranging within the top 5. So it kind of lost visibility a bit, including also for the civil servants. The rank was also among the top 5. So for the others group, it was always tailing at the end. And we found a significant difference between the way the foods were ranked by the very active manual workers compared to the university students and the civil servants, who are considered relatively moderate. So the next slide, please. So these are the results. You can see on the right, we have the ranking by the very active manual workers, the ranking by the university students, and the ranking by civil servants, and the ranking by all the groups combined. If we took all the data and combined it, we found that we compared the ranking. So you can see that the one with the lowest blue shows the one that was ranked number 1. And then the one that is at the blue was the one that was ranked number 1. The lowest bar was the one that was 1. The highest bar is the one that was ranked last because of the numerical value. So we found a significant difference, particularly between the ranking of the very active manual workers, but the ranking between the university students and civil servants, the difference, although there were slight differences, the differences was not significant. Next slide, please. So this is just a pictorial. This is just a pictorial of the way the individual rankings were done. So you can see the color green, which represents ugali in all the groups, actually is very visible. But when you move from one group to another, you'll see which colors now come more effectively. But generally, ugali seems to be the main carbohydrate for all of them, showing that actually ugali was coming up tops. The next slide, please. So we did a pairwise comparison to determine between the rankings, which is the most, whether there were any differences between the ranking between the ugali and any other carbohydrate energy staple. So the only difference, we saw a significant difference, but there was no significant difference between the ranking between chapati and rice and the ranking between Irish potato and banana. But the ranking between all the other foods was significant. So that is what that table shows. And then for cross-check, the next slide, for cross-check, we did the frequency consumption to determine which foods, whether the top food they have selected actually appeared within the 7 days food consumption. So we saw that the manual workers, we could see that 6 days, at least the manual workers indicated they had consumed ugali. 3 times they had consumed chapati, and then rice was just once. For university students, ugali was 5 times, and then there was 3 times for rice and 4 times for chapati. The rest were lower. And for civil servants, we saw ugali was 4 times in a week. So the highest consumption was, frequency of consumption was among the manual workers. So we tried to find out why they select these foods. Just for interest, we wanted to know why is it that they select ugali. Some of them, they just gave questions, answers like, we asked them what happens when you do not eat enough food. First of all, to just see whether they understood what they were responding to. So they indicated that they feel hungry, body weakness, hunger pangs, they become unproductive, exhausted. They just feel like they have not eaten when they feel the food is not enough. Some of them feel fatigued, headache, heartburn, stomach upsets, acidity. Some of them say they don't like talking when they are hungry. They feel angry, worrisome, thirsty, hopeless, and they give up easily, or some of them just did not have energy. So in terms of what they selected, it helps them to avoid those discomforts that they were experiencing. So the next slide, please. The next slide, we did the results of the 24-hour recall, just to a confirmatory question to see whether they actually reported correctly on the 27-day food frequency. So the 24-hour recall, we wanted to know whether it was a normal day, whether they were at home, and or it was a day they were at work, and which food they actually ate. And the results, next slide. The results actually indicated, we did results for all the groups, but for the civil servants, we saw that 29% of them had reported consuming ugali and rice within the first the 24 hours. Manual workers, 53% indicated they had consumed ugali, and 40% indicated they had consumed chapati. The next one was the university students, who 30% indicated they had consumed rice. So only 17% had consumed ugali. So for the reasons given for the frequency, they were saying that they needed energy to work. or it's the routine of their work or timing of the activities of the day, or they just wanted to stay healthy and strong. So we find that energy expenditure determines how you consume meals. So this is the comparison of the foods that were consumed by different groups. So let's go to the next slide. The next slide now is a comparison of the meal frequency. How many times do you eat in a day, based on the fact that you are looking for the most energy from the food that you consume. So on the foods that they were consuming, we realized ugali was the most frequently consumed, particularly among the very manual workers. But 80% of the manual workers consumed ugali 3 times a day. They consumed meals 3 times a day. Civil servants, 59% consumed 3 times a day, and the university students, 48% consumed 3 times a day. There were very few manual workers who consumed less than 3 meals. But the other 2 groups, moderate active groups, they consumed at least 2 meals in a day. And the difference was significant between the manual workers and the university students and the civil servants. Next slide, please. So this, at this level, we compared. We wanted to know the significance between the meals that are consumed by the very active manual workers and the civil servants and university students. So we found that if you compare the number of meals consumed by the manual workers and university students or civil servants, the difference was very significant. But when you compared university students and civil servants, the difference was not significant. So that shows that energy and the type of food that is consumed drives their productivity and the number of meals that they have to take to be able to deliver on their work, or maybe to get concentration. Next. So here we have the summary of the reasons why most of them indicated they preferred ugali, because we talked about culture, convenience at the beginning of the introduction in the literature review. So most of them indicated that ugali is bulky, satisfying. It is their preference. It's a heavy meal and giving energy. It's also cheap, available, and pocket-friendly, among the reasons they gave. But for very active manual workers, they say that they're simply looking for something that is energy-giving and has higher satiety index, or more feeling or satiation. So they're also looking for something. It is because it's readily available, the cost, affordability is everywhere, and then cheap and disposable income also determines what type of staple foods you take. Also, convenience and in terms of preparation also became an important factor, and intensity of work occupation. Those who felt that they are not working, they do not want too much energy for work, they opted for other options. But for the very active manual workers, the energy requirement was a very key factor for the kind of work that they are going to do. So ugali became their choice. But it was also affordability and availability, and convenience was also a factor. So next slide. For the least preferred foods, the respondents, the very active manual workers indicated that their foods were not satisfying, they are not filling, they have less energy. They say it is too light for their occupation. And some of it, like some foods have too much oil and they are not readily available. And on ugali, they said it is the least chance. It's according to their, some of them is just by default, is their culture, they eat ugali, so they go for it. But some of them, they express some intolerances for some foods, which is not with ugali. So like chapati, there was gluten sensitivity. It was hard to prepare. It requires a lot of time, and it does not taste good to some people. Bananas, because children cannot eat, it is food for children. They feel that it's too light for them. Potatoes, the potato, they felt that it dehydrates the body. It gives them heartburn. It's because of culture, and some of them felt it was baby food and not comfortable meal because of gas. Some felt that the cost, they didn't like it because of the cost. They also just didn't like the taste of food that is not their culture. So next slide, please. So we looked at the Kenya food composition tables to just try to evaluate which type of foods they have selected and the energy components in each of them. So we found that ugali and wheat flour-based foods, maize meal and wheat flour-based foods had high energy, but when they are cooked. But the other foods, because they have to add water, they had lower energy. And that's why, so that proved actually when the food is presented, empirically, we can see that the energy content is lower. So we are just looking at the food composition tables and the way it is prepared, the Kenyan food composition, and we actually confirmed the energy value for those foods is actually different as shown in the food composition table. So next slide, please. So this is the application of the results. The results of this study provide empirical evidence that different carbohydrate energy staples were selected differently based on the postprandial effect and level of activity. Factors such as satiety, enhanced productivity, endurance, and concentration are important. It also provides evidence of ranking of carbohydrate staple foods in Kenya, and it can be applied at individual level when selecting foods and also at informed policy and decision-making to enhance food and nutrition security in different settings. So for the conclusion, the results agree with latest studies that carbohydrate quality, glycemic index, and glycemic load are important factors in satiety, satiation activity of different individuals. Results also provide empirical evidence that ugali stands out as the undisputed carbohydrate energy staple in Kenya. And we found that even in many countries in Kenya, in the sub-Saharan Africa, about 10 countries, they also the maize meal in different names is also a top carbohydrate. So 90% of the very active manual workers will go for ugali. So the top ranking staple also match the preference ranking. So that is empirical evidence that carbohydrates are the main staple. So the recommended research is to determine the effect of the carbohydrate energy staples on postprandial glucose concentration and satiety to prove their claims, and also to evaluate how different accompaniments, combinations with the food influence satiety, index, and postprandial effect of commonly consumed carbohydrate foods. Thank you so much. That is my presentation. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Mary. That was an excellent presentation.
To participate and to share with you my work in this event of such significant importance in healthcare. I'm going to speak about efficiency of health expenditures in primary care in the unified health system in Brazil. I'm going to begin by explaining the subject in 3 aspects. First, primary health care. Second, resources allocation. And third, efficiency of health expenditures. Regarding primary health care, the Constitution of the Federative Republic of Brazil of 1988, when health was established as a right to all and a duty of the state, managers, and federal, state, and municipal levels of the unified health system begin to increasingly consider and prioritize primary health care under the perspective of implementing a new health care model in the country. At the same moment, to the advance of the municipalization process, it was necessary to adjust the policies for financing health either actions or services, and maintain the principle of equity to ensure resources from federal levels to states and cities. In the sense, laws and basic operational standards were instituted over the decades, establishing resources allocation to states, federal, district, and municipalities, such as 88 of 1990, using epidemiology as a priority. In 2012, the complementary law number 141 was enacted. This law established the allocation structure of federal resources to municipalities, respecting the criteria of health needs of the population. But in 2019, through Ordinance number 2979, created a new allocation structure of federal resources for primary health care in the municipalities with characteristics that broke with the previous basic care structure. This new structure of resource allocation reflected directly in the management and efficiency of public health expenditure in primary health care. Thus, the efficiency allocation of resources has become a challenge of managers. This scenario, which refers to the analysis of the management of financial resources in the context of allocative efficiency, has motivated this research with the aim of supporting the management of primary health care. The result was structured under three approaches. First, efficiency related to financing and the public health expenditures. Second, efficiency related to the provision of health service programs in primary health care. And third, the relation between efficiency and funding, spending, and the efficiency in service delivery in primary health care. The results showed that the resource efficiency in health can be analyzed by A, the structure and the result indicators, B, municipal health program cost estimators, and C, the producing information on costs and the input for management and the financing of unified health system. Studies demonstrated greater efficiency related to financing and the health expenditure. However, they did not show equivalent efficiency in the results of the actions and the services provided to active benefits for better health of the population. Well, let us talk about the indicators. The studies correlated the structure indicators with result indicators. What indicators were used to analyze the efficiency of public health expenditures? Let's look at three of them. First indicator is in relation to personal expenditure and the health-based attention expenditure, correlated to infant mortality coefficient. Regarding the efficiency parameter related to public spending, the structure indicator showed that both the indicator on average salary of the public sector worker in municipalities and the growth rate weighed bill per capita were higher in the North, Northeast, and the Middle East regions than South and Southeast regions. However, there was no change for the health-based attention expenditure indicator. When we look at the efficiency related to the provision of public health services, the infant mortality coefficient indicator in the same regions, North, Northeast, and Middle East, was higher than in relation to South and the Southeast regions. That means they had the worst indicators. When correlating the two parameters, it is observed that the infant deaths which occurred could have been avoided by health promotion actions. However, the results can contribute as instruments for the formulation, monitoring, evaluation, and improvement of public policy in the country. Second indicator used: financial resources correlated to the rate of hospitalizations potentially prevented by primary care related to systemic arterial hypertension. The analysis of the efficiency of primary health care is related to the actions developed by the Family Health Strategy Program. I would like to open a parenthesis here to explaining that the Family Health Strategy is a program created by the federal government for better health care of the population. Continuing, out of a total of 66 small municipalities in the state of Santa Catarina, 25 were efficient in terms of producing services for systemic arterial hypertension, while 41 municipalities were inefficient in relation to services of registration in the information system on hypertension and diabetes, individual care and home visits for users with hypertension. When you look at the efficiency parameter related to service provision, we observe that the quantitative of municipalities with efficiency service production does not correspond to the best assistant outcomes in the production of results, calculated by means of the rate of hospitalizations potentially avoided by significant causes to primary care linked to hypertension care. Only 11 municipalities were efficient regarding hypertension care in primary care. Of the total of 66 municipalities, 55, only 55 were inefficient. Thus, when correlating the parameters, we have that the efficiency in the service production related to hypertension is higher over the production of results, but none is higher than 50%. And the third and the final indicator addresses about per capita income with the rate of hospitalizations significant to outpatient care. I left this indicator for being the last one because it is the only one that shows a positive correlation between the structure and the results indicators. And this efficiency is related to the expansion of the coverage of the family health program in primary care, increasing from 13% to about 64% of the Brazilian population, with an increase of almost 6 times of the annual average number of medical consultations per capita. When we look at the efficiency parameter related to service delivery, we observe that the covered expansion of the family health program corresponds to the positive results of the rate of hospitalization significant outpatient care. Thus, by correlating the parameters, we have that it points out to the relation between the sharp reduction in hospitalization rates for ambulatory care-sensitive hospitalization with the expansion of access to basic medical care through the expansion of the family health program. Now, we will show two other ways of analyzing resource efficiency in healthcare. Municipal health program cost estimates. The analysis on efficiency is related to approach on cost estimation of dengue prevention and control program in Goiânia, state of Goiás in Brazil, considering epidemic and endemic periods of dengue transmission. When we look at the efficiency parameter related to service delivery, we observe that it presents some results of the cost estimation to dengue prevention and control program in monthly cost per capita being R$1.04 in the epidemic period and 75 centavos of real in the endemic period. Thus, when correlating the parameters, we have that in an indirect way, it presents the relation between the cost surplus arising from epidemics and the possibility of being invested in the endemic period in activities aiming to reduce the outbreak of transmission of dengue vector. And finally, the results showed that the efficiency of health resources can be analyzed through the producing information on costs and an input for management and financing of the unified health system. It is not said that the achievement of improvements in the dimensions financing and management necessarily depends on political decision. When we look at the efficiency parameter related to service provision, we observe that it addresses two perspectives for the application of cost management. First, concerns the macro view of the unified health system managed in the federal, state, and the municipal spheres. And second, the specific view of health unit managers. Thus, correlating the parameters, we have that the production and the use of cost information in decision-making, both for the management of the health system and for the management of health unity, are complementary and fundamental activities for the efficiency use of resources of the unified health system. Among the different studies, there was a consensus on the need of analyzing the efficiency of health expenditures allocated in the primary healthcare management, since efficiency is a criteria to be considered in an evaluation facing the decision-making process. In this sense, the data compilation provides support either for monitoring efficiency through structure and results indicators, or for a better planning of spending activities in health service delivery available. In addition, it leads to a debate in public policies about the direct relation between the expenditure efficiency with efficiency in the service delivery in primary healthcare. Reference: there was no point in having sufficient financial resources if their application were inefficient.
Unable to share. Okay, I'm still having some issue.
Carmen, you just start presenting and ask for next slide. I think
Next, okay, sorry. Okay, next slide. Okay, so nutrient and diet on endometriosis. And then I like the importance of early diagnosis and patient preference in health outcomes. And at the final, we'll look at the conclusion, some takeaways. Next slide. Okay, so this is a picture of the challenges. Endometriosis is a gynecological disease. It is, I don't know if many people know about how it is and what it is, but it forms outside the lining in the uterus. So the uterine lining is formed outside the uterus. So that's an abnormality. It's chronic and it affects women worldwide. In North America alone, 5.5 million women, and that is understatement because the endometriosis is difficult to diagnose. There are a lot of delays, up to 8.1 average. So the average year for diagnosing endometriosis is at 8.1 years. So we have seen up to 24 years before endometriosis is diagnosed. It has no cure. The cause is unknown. And those individuals who have endometriosis, the quality of life is very to the point where it is worse than death. A lot of individuals who has it prefer to die than to have endometriosis with the difficulties that occur. It's estimated of 69.4 billion dollars in spending on endometriosis, and still there are some information that's still not being shown. So some of the symptoms you can find on this, it will be, say, the pain, severe pain, maybe infertility, and we have complications like probably it's the high cancer risk, it's a high heart disease risk. And for some instance, we have when we're having it in the gastrointestinal endometriosis, we have here things like intestinal blockages and twisting. So you can see how this can be very challenging with everything that we are looking at that is very difficult to diagnose. Next slide. And so I want to look at, review some literature on endometriosis and nutrient health. Some of these things are taken from my research. So it's all basically from my research. But you can see endometriosis affects many parts of the body. And the location says where and what type of endometriosis. For example, we can have cutaneous endometriosis. We can have the extra pelvic endometriosis, which affect the areas around the pelvic region. There is a genitourinary endometriosis. You can see in the bladder, you talk about the urethral and renal organs. And so you can see how much endometriosis can affect various, and it can be a comorbid disease. It can, the extra pelvic region usually include what you call the uterus, the ovaries, and so forth. But it also includes the fallopian tube. But we definitely have a specific fallopian tube endometriosis because it can get very extensive inside the fallopian tube as well, which most often creates the infertility in most patients or individuals. The one that we are going to be focused on, though, is the gastrointestinal, and it affects the gastric and the intestinal area, which is oftentimes relating to nutritional issues. Next slide. Okay, so we come on to giving an overview of the gastrointestinal endometriosis. Up to about 37% of the patients with it occurring up to 37% of the patients with endometriosis. And if I get cut off, look, because I'm timed on this as well. All women are kind of affected by this, even post-menopause, and it frequently affects in areas like the intestine and around the colon. It has dietary implications. Next slide. And so I took the liberty and looking at some of the studies related to gastrointestinal studies relating to nutritional health and endometriosis. And I looked at what we call a case cohort study by Echo Health Hall in 2015 to assess the gastrointestinal symptoms among endometriosis patients. They used 109 patients and 65 control were investigated and compare those patients with the control. Next slide, please. And so what this study found is that patients with endometriosis experience significantly more aggravated abdominal pain, constipation, bloating, and flutterance, defecation, urging to go to the bathroom, and when get there, this incomplete sensation. They have nausea and vomiting. So those patients with endometriosis compared to control were obviously having those issues coming up. And using opium are treated with what we call an hormone, that's infertility hormone. They experience more severe symptoms. And this study concludes that there's a poor association between the symptom and the lesions where it's located. And there seems to be, there is an existing comorbidity between endometriosis and the irritable bowel syndrome. So the patient goes to the doctor and they are treating them for irritable bowel syndrome, but in fact they may be having endometriosis. One of the reasons we can see how challenging it is to diagnose endometriosis. Next slide, please. And so the next study was a case series study by Kodo et al. In 2020, and to assess the intestinal, gastrointestinal endometriosis among endometriosis patients. They had 5 patients that underwent laparoscopic resection for intestinal or gastrointestinal endometriosis. Next slide. And so what they found, diagnosis of intestinal endometriosis is difficult to obtain for surgery. And so the intestinal endometriosis occur at the advanced stage. So with the advanced pelvic fibers and adhesions, because at that time, it's very difficult to diagnose. And what they also found that the mean operational time ranges from 152 to 282 minutes. And the blood loss was severely more, that's 110 milliliters, depending on what area it's affected, whether it is in the colon or it is in the intestinal region. And so they conclude that laparoscopic surgery for intestinal endometriosis was safe, but it was technically challenging because of the extensive fibers and adhesions. And accurate diagnosis of intestinal endometriosis requires several steps at that stage, of course, because it is more severe. First, there has to be clinical symptoms, you have the imaging, and you have intraoperative findings. And at that stage as well, their malignancy, the malignant information is possible. So as part of that, complications that we talk about the endometriosis. Next slide, please. And so coming on to, because we looked at the slide from, I think I have made some changes in these slides, but the dietary and nutritional role on endometriosis. And so we are seeing that it occurs. There is an impact. So here's one study by Barnard. It says, it talk about the dietary factors, the effects, and the biologic role. I won't read all of this, just you can see the slides. And so the first, you talk about intake, high intake of dietary fat. So, and red meat is bad, according to this. So it increased the risk of developing endometriosis. And in that case, the red meat is associated with a high concentration of steroid and inflammation. And that because endometriosis thrives on inflammation, that is bad, according to that research. And since fiber and plant-based diet is good, because fiber reduces the circulatory estrogen concentration, and it reduces that inflammatory properties, and estrogen circulation, endometriosis also thrive on that. And if you can reduce that, according to this research, it will reduce the effect. You cannot treat it. So far, there are no treatment, no cure for it, but according to these factors, it says you can control and treat. And so vitamin D is good for Karen, and it's endometriosis. And so it reduces the pain, it reduces those other effects on it in terms of the total antioxidant, and improve the anti-inflammatory effects. So it reduces that. And the vitamin C is also, we say, increased antioxidant and reduce inflammatory. And you can see what the good part of it, which that it reduces inflammatory, and it reduces the effect of making it worse. Next slide. And so this next research, so is Hildebrand et al. And you can see there are, it says, look at the dietary factor, the effect, and the biological role of endometriosis. And so fish oil capsule combined with B12, according to this research, is good. It's an antioxidant and anti-inflammatory property, and it has it. And so alcohol and increased consumption of red meat and trans fat is bad. It's a risk factor for developing estrogen. As we talked before, the estrogen is a proper thing that the endometriosis thrives on. And so significantly correlate with, so we have certain research that correlates with alcohol with chronic inflammatory diseases. And so fruits and vegetables, dairy products, unsaturated fat, fiber, soya, plants, and caffeine did not show to be clear. So it's neither positive nor negative according to this research, because some contain antioxidant and it reduces inflammatory, but others needs to be revised into what kind of fat that does it, how that's related to the endometriosis. So that was not clear. Next slide, please. And we look at this these orders. It says antioxidant is good, as we have seen before. It suppresses pain and bleeding of women with endometriosis. Vitamin D in this research, it says unclear. And so there's no visible difference in pain on pain. And fatty acid is positive. It reduces endometriosis-related pain, but there's no significant effect on cysts. So they said they are positive in one way, but they cannot find a significant effect on some ways. So gluten is unclear. It's not clear whether to avoid gluten could be effective on endometriosis. And soya is positive according to this research, which reduce endometriosis pain and reduce estrogen. Again, that is important, and the estrogen development. And so it also went into combination of nutrients, and so this was positive in that sense. Next slide, please. And I look at this as finally in terms of the summary. And so based on all the research we have seen, future study needed to be confirmed on influence on the nutritional health. The dietary information about the role of endometriosis is not consistent. When you look at all the research, they are all over the place. The research is still new and it's young and need to be more research on that. There are some few consistency in all this research that we have presented here, that foods and substances that you can exclude from the diet to avoid estrogen and inflammation buildup, such as red meat. That was definitely seen to be consistent among the research. Next slide, please. And so what do we see the importance of early diagnosis or intervention on patients? So we'll look at, so research showed that more serious, as I see from what we have presented so far, more serious illnesses and poor health are treatment outcome occur at the advanced stage of endometriosis. But the nutritional health make research the endometriosis worse. Okay, if it's delayed, and patient preference, what the patient encounter, what the patients know is important. It matters. One of the things is that one size does not fit all. It might work on one individual, but it will not work with another individual. Next slide, please. And so, for example, I mentioned what may work on one person but not on another. So one patient in a qualitative research pointed out that a certain substance that will work on, this is dietary sugar, would work on some individuals but did not work on her. And so we need to consider the patient when we are, as a health professional, to consider in doing treatment, as I said. And in one instance, that when we have teamwork relating to the patient, other individuals belong with it, multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary research, and real-world evidence help to understand the endometriosis and individuals' need. So this is just how we want to envision that in any case, whatever we as researchers or health professionals do, need to include the individuals, need to consider the individual's need. So patient health professional partnership helps reduce diagnosis, delay, and improve outcomes. Next slide, please. And so what I want to take away from this is that Endometriosis imposes clinical and financial burdens on the patient and the society. But women with endometriosis often experience gastrointestinal symptoms, as well listed some of those, nausea and all related to eating certain foods. And we can link, there's a link between endometriosis and nutritional health. Endometriosis is comorbid with other gynecological gastrointestinal disease, and it is a challenging to diagnose. And as an example, the IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, which is our seeing that it is often confused with endometriosis. And so final takeaway is that endometriosis is important. Next slide, please. And so early diagnosis can reduce and mitigate serious health illnesses. It can avoid serious complications, and it can reduce the impact on endometriosis. As we said, we cannot cure, we can reduce and increase and improve outcomes in treatment. Health professionals, our practitioners and policy makers need to be vigilant, proactive, and cognizant of the individual's patient's needs. And finally, again, he said more research is needed about the role of nutrient and diet and endometriosis. Next slide. And I think that is it. So these are some of the references that were used in this presentation. And if you can see, I have two of my publications and any questions.
Thank you so much, Carmen. Your presentation was excellent. And now I would like to ask everyone, do you have any question? Please ask.
UCLA since oh my goodness, 1996 and all the way to 2015. Again, adult division, and been at the treatment of anxiety disorders clinic. Presently, I chair a small institute for anxiety disorders clinic here at UCLA, across from UCLA Hospital. And we started this institute back in 1994. Today, my presentation is going to be investigating comorbid obsessive compulsive disorder, body dysmorphic disorder, and eating disorders, emphasizing theoretical and practical approaches to the treatment. This paper was written by Dr. Ida Gorbes, as well as Alexander Gorbes, and a lot of effort was also put into this paper by Joseph O'Neill, who is a major researcher at UCLA. So we shall begin. As we know, human beings are not as easy as they may appear on the paper. There is a component of all of us that implies impulsivity versus compulsivity continuum in disorders on the spectrum. Obsessive compulsive disorder and anorexia, they are on one end of the spectrum, meaning that they're all about control and all about thinking, overthinking, Now, if you go a little bit further here, and I'll show you a little further here and move from this cycle to this, it would be trichotillomania and skin picking, where is the loss of control. And there is a little bit of pleasure. Little bit to the middle, we put hoarding, body dysmorphic, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating, where there is a loss of control. Body dysmorphic disorder also has loss of control. They may be contemplating, they may be thinking about it, they may even have compulsions here. With bulimia disorder, you have an essence of them controlling not wanting to eat, but then breaking down and eating after 3 days, 4th day. And with binge eating, they are also not eating, trying to keep the weight and regimen, and then blurting everything out and eating on the 3rd day. And this is basically what is happening. With hoarding as well, there is some element of pleasure. They may be not promising themselves to go and buy things, but then they're breaking out and they're going and buy things. And there is an element of pleasure there. With binge eating and bulimia, there wasn't when they throw up, they feel horrible, or the next day with binge eating, they, despite of the fact that they had pleasure while they were eating, the next day when they're 3 pounds more, they actually feel guilty. We have here on this end of the continuum sexual overactivity, compulsive gambling, and pyromania. We just had a patient recently discharged with compulsive gambling. There is more pleasure in it and they cannot stop. But these people with pyromania, they burn trees and they're a real problem. So on this end of continuum, luckily, I have never seen any people like this, but they are all the way, no guilt, no remorse, and they're antisocial personality. They may kill a person. They don't have this organ called guilt. Whereas with obsessive compulsive disorder and anorexia, you have excessive, horrible guilt. I'll move on right now to speak about the pertinent issues. What is obsessive compulsive disorder? Well, for sure, it is not a perfume called obsession. It is not anything that is described in television or shows or in a romantic book or a poem. It is a recurrent, persistent thought, impulse, or image that is very, 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 very disturbing. And these images, they predominate and impossible to get rid of. It's like a crazy glue that enters your mind against your will, and you cannot rid of them. It's inability to make decisions. It's like a crazy glue thinking just about, oh, I will not be able to move from this chair. Oh, I will not be able to get dressed. Or maybe I sexually molested the child. Something bizarre. Or maybe I have killed a person and now I have to get up and drive this route for another 20, 30 times. Thought and impulse and image is excessive. Person recognizes sometimes that the thought is not necessary, but the own mind cannot stop it. As a result, because of extreme anxiety, people are urged to engage in compulsions, repetitive behaviors, such as washing hands, or mental acts, renegotiating, recounting, going back and saving this child, from under the car, praying, counting, repeating words. Person feels driven to perform repetitive activities and behavior and acts are considered to be compulsive behaviors. What is body dysmorphic disorder? They are not the same. It's a preoccupation. It's very different. Very, very different. Preoccupation with imagined defect in appearance, such as nose, slight physical anomaly that is present and person is concerned with markedly excessive, clinically insignificant and not visible to other eye and socially occupational, rather important areas of functioning. So preoccupation is not better accounted by anybody else or by any mental disorder. Insight is typically low or non-existent, and they are merged and preoccupied by this anomaly throughout the day and night, unable to sleep, and they feel that it has to be corrected. Classified under obsessive compulsive related disorders in DSM-5. Obsessions are usually related to the external parts of the body. It is not, like hypochondriasis when people think it's my liver or it's my, gastrointestinal problems, or it's my appendix, or it's my heart. It's mostly nose and 56%, skin 28%, hair 6%, chin, ears. And then it vacillates. They're doing compulsions, but in a different way. They usually compare, contrast themselves to beautiful people, mirror checking or not mirror checking at all, grooming, skin picking, seeking medical procedures, and imagined dermatologists, and mental acts comparing, contrasting. Or they will be looking at the puddles to see whether or not they're still looking good. Relationship with OCD. Yes, there is. BDD are similar in that way that they're both composed. However, in BDD, there is a thought of behavioral focus strictly in appearance. Strictly in appearance, there is overvalued ideation. Optical cord is not working. The vision, the feedback from the eyes and into the brain is not similar. Obsession is a preoccupation. Compulsion is a repetitive behaviors. What is an eating disorder? Eating disorder is afflicted by human beings in the United States alone by 12% of human beings, both men and girls. And there is anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binging eating. BDD preoccupation with perceived distortion, specific body part. Camouflage is the same as with, like, for example, BDD. There is a social avoidance, like in BDD. These are similarities with eating disorders. Binging, purging food, unnecessary surgical alterations, but there are surgical alterations also of stomachs and taking away the fat, excessive exercise. Also with BDD, people are doing it, but with eating disorders like 200 exercise, excessive exercise in attempt to lose weight with eating disorders, keep a certain body shape, low insight with BDD and low insight with anorexia, and reassurance seeking also with anorexia and with BDD. Multidimensional comorbidity between OCD, BDD, and EDs has been discovered last year with myself, Dr. O'Neill, and Alexander. Since we're treating multidimensionally the last resort cases here at our small institute and only see cases that are last resort and couldn't be treated anywhere else. Three-way comorbidity occurs in 1.5 cases with a primary diagnosis of OCD, 3.7 of cases with primary diagnosis of BDD, 9.8 cases with primary diagnosis of ED. I'm repeating myself, but I wanted to emphasize they're highly difficult to treat because of high impulsivity and vacillation. Once you get one of the treatment protocols under control, the other one is emerging. Three-way comorbidity may be anticipated under 5% of OCD, BDD in 10% ED patients. Altogether, this means that there is 2.8% Americans suffer from three way comorbidity, which is approximately 8 million Americans. 8 million Americans are misdiagnosed, underdiagnosed, and unprotected with this horrific illness that is not being detected now. Coming back to my assessment. Multidimensional comorbidity occurs in small but non-negligible minority of patients holds true around the world, not just in the United States. I'm repeating myself, not just in the United States. OCD, BDD, and eating disorders are associated with other mental disorders, health problems. I wanted to mention that especially in eating disorders program, a multidimensional team of medical doctors is a must, such as gastroenterological problems are being not assessed and burdened and afflicted, such as cardiological, bone density, such as kidneys, such as blood and brain, obviously, hormonal issues, and many, many more. We treat people with the medical teams, and most importantly, to assess, thorough assessment with all three disorders medically. Difficulties with treatments occur with all three disorders, and medical diagnosis and working with medical teams is essential. It may seem that it's complicated, but in any medical field, its mind and body connection has been known for 3,000 years. And also do not forget that in diagnosis, assessment is properly the most appropriate thing to do. Do not be hesitant to spend more time on assessment and then start the treatment after extremely thorough assessment following many hours of treatment. I cannot thank you enough. I would like to also discuss that prior to taking these cases and after you did the assessment, do not hesitate and be sure to alleviate depression, to alleviate panic disorders, to alleviate many other hinders that may not allow you to properly proceed with the treatment because they're highly difficult, but also may not let you properly proceed. So identify the obstacles and move cautiously. Prioritize as though you're playing chess. I would like to ask the audience, I don't know how many of you are there, for questions that may have been brought up or thought of during this presentation. It is my first presentation abroad, so far away, and it is my first article was published only last year in medical journal and was very well received, and I believe that this is a crucial new malady that is a three-way comorbidity we must not only identify but also examine possibilities of treatment. You will find many references in the back of this paper. I would like to extend my gratitude to Alexander Gorbens. My gratitude, first and most importantly, goes to Dr. Joseph O'Neill.
Okay, now there is an e-poster presentation by Hector Nava, National Institute of Respiratory Disease, Mexico. Hector Nava, are you there? I think he might be not available, but my team will share his e-poster. Hector Nava, are you there? Please open your mic. Hector? Hector, am I audible? Hector is there, but I don't know what is happening with him. Hector, please open up your mic. Hector, your e-poster has been shared on the screen. Please open up your mic. Hector, are you listening? Hector, your e-poster has been shared on the screen. So please say something. Hector, if there is any problem, you can ask us. We can help you out. Okay, listeners, we just have to wait for him. He had some problem, so he will try to be back. So just wait for him.
bisa
Okay, listeners and speakers, there might be some problem on his side. So at that point, now we will like to conclude the today's session. My heartfelt thanks to all the speakers and attendees who made this event a success with their eminence and presence. We hope to meet you all tomorrow for more exciting, thought-provoking research work by several other eminent persons across the globe. The Zoom link will be shared tomorrow, and the Zoom link for tomorrow will be shared today. So enjoy your day. And we are very thankful for attending our day one webinar. Hope to see you all by tomorrow. Take care.